My name is Monica Wilkinson Kelly. I'm the archivist at the Edith B. Ford Memorial Library in Ovid, New York. This interview is being conducted as part of the Cayuga and Seneca Lakes Agriculture and Craft Beverage Memory Project. Today is August 19, 2021, and I am interviewing Shannon Brock of Silver Thread Vineyard. Good morning, Shannon.
Good morning.
So, can you tell me your full name and the address of the vineyard?
Yep, my name is Shannon Brock, and Silver Thread Vineyard is at 1401 Kaywood Road in Lodi, New York.
And you are on the eastern shore of Seneca Lake.
Yes.
Right? And can you tell me about your background, where you're from, and what you studied?
Sure. So Silver Thread is a joint project between myself and my husband, Paul Brock, and we're actually both from Saratoga Springs, New York, which is about 4 hours east of here in the Capital District. And we became interested in wine. It started as a hobby when we were in our 20s, and we began learning everything we could about wine, and eventually moved here to the Finger Lakes in 2005 for Paul to go to graduate school at Cornell for a master's degree in viticulture and enology. And while he was working on that, I began independent study through the Wine and Spirit Education Trust of London, England, on my my advanced certificate and then my diploma in wine and spirits. So we both, upon coming to the Finger Lakes, worked on advanced degrees in wine. It wasn't something that we knew we wanted to do when we were really young, but it's something we learned about as young adults and decided, rather than just learning on the job, as some people do with wine, we really felt education was important. So we moved here, both got our educations, and then worked for other wineries and wine-related organizations for 6 years. And then we bought Silver Thread in 2011.
Okay. So you had no family background in agriculture or farming whatsoever?
Not really. I have a grandparent on each side of maternal and paternal side of my family who grew up on farms, but nothing having to do with grapes and wine.
And then what year was it you started working in the industry?
So we moved to the Finger Lakes in 2005. Before that, I guess our only full-time experience is before moving to the Finger Lakes, we went to New Zealand and did the harvest of 2005, which is in our springtime because the seasons are reversed. So 2005 was really the start for us, and we went to New Zealand, did that harvest, and then came here to the Finger Lakes.
All right. And when did you purchase this property? You aren't the original founder, correct?
Right. So we bought it in 2011, and at the time we bought it, the winery was 20 years old, and the vineyard had been planted 30 years, for 30 years. So the 1982 is the date of the oldest plantings that we have. And the oldest, the earliest Silver Thread label was 1991. And Richard Fiegel was the founder. And at the time we bought it, he was ready to retire. And a lot of people think that in wine families that it always gets passed down through the family, but the family doesn't always want to carry on with the business. And that was the case here, which was fortunate for Paul and I because we obviously weren't going to inherit our family's winery or, work our way into it. So it was a good situation for us. And
how many acres of vines do you have?
There's about 10 acres here, a little bit. It depends on how you count it, but it's about 10 acres. And we're in the process of expanding that to 14 over the next couple of years.
Okay. And how many acres were there initially? I think I read there were 6 acres or something. Plantings.
Right. So at the time we bought it was between 6 and 7, and then we've just been adding to it a little bit.
Right. I see you have a lot of drainage tiles over on one of the fields you're expanding on. Can you talk about the importance of that a little bit?
Yeah, drain tiling is not the most romantic topic, but it's really important for farming here in the Finger Lakes, especially as we're seeing higher rainfall amounts and more like heavy rain events. It's really important to make sure that the water can drain out of the field because vines don't like to be growing in a situation where their roots are always waterlogged. So drain tiling was actually invented here in the Finger Lakes, and our Like the modern way of doing it is to use perforated PVC piping, but in the old day they really did use clay tiles, like ceramic clay tiles, and we have some. I can actually see them from where we're sitting. We have some old ones just laying around. And so where Silver Thread is located has been a grape farm since the 1880s. So when we were just digging up our new field to put in the modern drain tile, we found pieces of clay tile, from the old days, because that spot that we're planting used to be a vineyard, and there's definitely evidence that farmers for a couple hundred years have been trying to
John Johnston in Geneva, and most of them at that time were made in Waterloo, so it's really a long history in Seneca County.
I know, people can visit the Drain Tile Museum.
That's true. And can you talk about the types of grapes that are grown here?
Sure. So Silver Thread was unique at the time it was planted back in the 80s, because it's only ever had European Vitis vinifera vines planted here. So the original planting was Riesling and Chardonnay, and then very soon after that, some Pinot Noir and Gewürztraminer. And then about 10 years after that, Cabernet Franc and Cabernet Sauvignon were added. And so we haven't changed that mix of grapes. When we've been adding vines, we have been putting in more of, more Riesling, more Cabernet Franc, just adding quantity to the varieties we already have.
And can you talk about the challenges of growing vinifera grapes in the climate here in the Finger
Sure.
Lakes?
So vinifera grapes are originate in Europe. So they're not, they don't have good natural defenses to some of the fungal diseases and insect pests that we have here in upstate New York. So you have to be very much on top of caring for the vines during the growing season, really monitoring the rainfall, constantly being out and scouting, knowing what these diseases look like, and really doing what needs to be done to mitigate those. We take a unique approach here at Silver Thread. We're a bio-intensive farm, so we're using a lot of biological disease control, which, in a wet year like the one we're having right now, or like we had in 2018, we're actually seeing better results than a lot of farms that are using chemical controls.
So you're not growing any hybrid grapes?
Not at the moment. We don't have any hybrids, but we actually, our new vineyard planting that we'll be putting in over the next few years is going to be some hybrid varieties, because we're finding that they are a little bit more resilient, and just looking to the future and kind of the uncertainty with the weather, we feel like having some hybrids, high quality Cornell developed hybrids as part of our program here at Silver Thread will be kind of good insurance going forward.
Can you talk about, I know you're officially probably still in this banana belt. Can you talk about the microclimate here?
Sure. So this is a really prime spot. I mean, I mentioned that it's been a farm going back to the 1880s. And the reason for that is for over 100 years, people have recognized that this is a really warm area within the Finger Lakes region. Seneca Lake is the deepest of the Finger Lakes, and the deepest part of Seneca Lake is right out in front of where our vineyard sits. We're also very close to the water. So in the winter time, we're protected from the most extreme cold weather events. And in the fall, we have an extended growing season, and in the spring, things stay a little bit cooler, preventing early bud break at this location.
Right. So how has 2021 been for you? Have you had any damage so far from the rain?
No, so far things have been going well for us. I mean, it's definitely been a challenging vintage. Like I mentioned, we have to be really on top of what's happening in our vineyard, and out there walking through on a daily basis. But we feel like our growing strategies, and we also use cover cropping, so that really prevents erosion and helps with uptake of excess water when we get. It's been a really rainy year, so
right. So mowing between the vines, the stuff that used to be done is not done. It's not.
We
really
mow.
considered.
We haven't been mowing very much this year, and we also have a cover crop growing directly under the vines. So that, like I said, that by not mowing, all that extra green is helping to take up some of that water and pull it away from the vines. It might be a challenge in a dry year, like too much competition, but in a wet year like this, it's very helpful.
did you have damage 3 years ago in 2018?
We had this big flood in 2018 where we got, in our location, we got over 10 inches of rain in one day, one night really. And to be honest, the biggest problem we had was extreme erosion to our driveway. So it made it hard for people to get here to taste the wine afterward. But, because of the cover cropping that we use, it really, we didn't have erosion. There were a lot of vineyards in the area that had erosion problems,
right.
But we were spared that.
And COVID, has that been a terrible struggle for you? How did that
I
work?
prefer to see COVID as an opportunity. I think I'm an optimistic person, and I think the best way to handle big challenges is to see the opportunities presented there. At our winery, we've been working toward a more high value tasting experience for a while, and the fact that we were forced into seated reservation tastings by the rules that New York State put in place to mitigate COVID-19, it pushed us even faster in that direction, but we were already heading that way, so it wasn't as big of a stretch for us as it might have been for some other places. Also, we moved to doing a lot of virtual programming, and I have a background as a teacher and a wine teacher in particular. My husband also is a professor of winemaking at Finger Lakes Community College, so for us it came very naturally and easily to switch over to doing virtual programming, and that was successful for us.
And what's it like to be a woman in the industry?
Oh, that's a great question. I definitely feel like when I started in the wine industry a little over 15 years ago, I was definitely in the minority as a woman, particularly on the winemaking side and on the sales side of wine. The distribution, wholesale sales, you didn't see a lot of women. There's been a really big positive change though that I've witnessed over that time, the time I've been in the industry. And I think, while it's not perfect, I think it's a much more welcoming place for women in all aspects of the industry.
And how many people do you employ here seasonally versus full-time?
We have 6 employees in all for Silver Thread, and sometimes in the winter, 2 of those people are part-time, so they have more limited hours in the winter because we're not we close our tasting room during the winter months because we are on a seasonal road, so it just gets hard for people to get here.
Right. And you mentioned New York State protocols for COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Has New York State been very supportive of the industry in general? Have you?
In my experience, New York State is a really great place to be in the wine industry. They, going back to the 1970s with the start of the farm winery law, but they've built on that ever since. And they have there's a lot of special carve outs for farm wineries that allow us to do things, such as sell wine directly to restaurants, sell wine directly to consumers. It's just it's I think a really great business climate for us here in New York.
And can you describe, from what I hear from other participants of these interviews, there's a real kinship between wineries in the area. Have you been finding that, like if you need a barrel, if you need something, that people are very willing?
Absolutely.
A great community.
Absolutely. It's a great community. I mean, most of our closest friends are also in the wine industry, but there's a real collegiality. I think part of that has to do with the fact that Finger Lakes as a region is still kind of an underdog region. So we're all struggling to get more attention, more critical acclaim, to be taken more seriously by the global wine industry, and that's something we can really all work together when people visit the tasting rooms, they'll often say, like, so I know, you might not want to talk about your competitors, but which other wineries do you recommend? And I always laugh at that and say, we know that when you come and visit us, you're not just going to one winery. Nobody
Right.
comes to the Finger Lakes and only stops at one. So it's to all of our benefit if we can help you find a collection of wineries that will be to your taste and give you a really awesome overall experience, because then you're going to come back. If there were only one good winery here,
Right. People like variety.
right, you wouldn't come. I always tell people it's a very friendly competition. Of course, we all want to be your favorite winery, but we know that, by pushing each other to be better, we'll be attracting more people overall.
And what is your production level? How many cases do you produce
We
annually?
we make about 3,000 cases, so it's very small. But I always point out to people that wine is farming. So last year, 2020 was a really great quality year for us, but we didn't meet that production goal of 3,000 cases last year because we just didn't have that many grapes. But this year, looks to be a bigger crop out there in the vineyard. So it's always fluctuating a little bit, but.
So do you have a signature wine, and what sets you apart from other wineries in the area?
So one of the ways that people find us and are interested in coming here to taste is that we're using biointensive farming practices, which is a type of organic farming where we're relying on biological disease control to the greatest extent possible. So that's something of growing interest to consumers, to really understand not just what they're drinking, but how it was grown, how it was produced. So I would say that all of our estate grown wines, from our Riesling to Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and also a red blend that we make that's Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Merlot, those are all grown using those biological methods. So that's a big that's of growing interest to people.
And as far as being good stewards of the land and sustainability, I read that all of your electricity comes from solar powered electricity. Is that true?
Yeah. So we installed solar power back in 2015, and we are still connected to the grid, but over the course of the year, we have consistently generated more than we actually use here to run the winery and the tasting room, and part of that, a big part of that is being very energy efficient. So our building is really well insulated and has a pretty small footprint to allow us to run everything using the solar.
And can you talk about the market unknowns and just the climate unknowns? What do you consider one of your greatest stressors at this point?
That's a great question. I think that wine is. They always say it's pretty recession proof, so we don't worry too much about the economy. I would say that climate change is a really big unknown. I mean, we know it's happening, and we're trying to adjust our farming practices, but if something like, if things continue to get more damaging, I mean, you can sort of imagine a scenario where we might have a year where we don't have a crop or have a really small crop, and that's pretty frightening. There's also a pretty scary invasive insect pest called spotted lanternfly that has established itself in Pennsylvania, and we know it's moving into New York. That's another scary thing. Just, I would say those things that you really just don't have individual control over are pretty scary.
Do you worry about it, or you can't control it?
Well, I mean, you can. Yes, I'm a worrier, so I do worry, but you have to try and talk yourself out of it, because what are you going to do? You just have to stay educated, I think, and do your best. Don't live in a bubble. Talk to your neighbors. Cornell's a great resource for all things related to that. So they have a lot of great information that we always make sure we keep up on.
I forgot. I usually ask first, what is the significance of the name of your winery?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So Silver Thread is actually a local waterfall that's here in the town of Lodi. And it's, unfortunately, it's private property. It would have been nice if it got absorbed into the New York State Park system at some point because I've heard it's really beautiful, but unfortunately it's privately owned, so you can't go there. But it's in the Seneca County official history. It's the frontispiece when you open the book.
Right.
It's a drawing
From, I think, 1876.
of Silver Thread Falls.
Right.
So
Yeah,
it's
beautiful.
very well known among people who have lived in Seneca County for a long time.
Right. And so, what do you think is your greatest achievement, your personal achievement in the industry?
Oh gosh, I think one of the things that we've brought to the industry is a real focus on education. Both Paul and I sought out an advanced degree in wine before becoming owners, and we really encourage all of our employees are formally educated in wine, and we really have we both have been teachers here in the region for various kinds of accredited courses. So I would say that just really pushing that aspect, because historically the Finger Lakes region was a lot of farmers who grew up farming but weren't necessarily formally trained or hadn't necessarily visited wineries in other countries or other parts of our country to really learn how the Finger Lakes fits
Right.
in that bigger wine world. So I would hope that we've done that ourselves, and that we've helped other people in the industry do that, and we really feel like that helps our whole industry here in the Finger Lakes to advance.
Great. So, what would you tell somebody thinking about going into the wine industry?
I would say that it's great, but to do your homework first. It's a lot of times people are attracted to one particular aspect of wine, but I think it's a very interdisciplinary industry, and you have to be able to do a lot of different things and be willing to do a lot of different things, especially here in the Finger Lakes where all the wineries are small. So, if you're that type of person who's really curious and likes to work hard, definitely look into it. But, maybe do an internship, go work at a winery part-time to see if the reality of it is what you imagined. Right. Because with people I've met who have gone into it and then left, it's usually because it wasn't, they had an idea before they came to it, and the reality isn't
quite the same.
Yeah.
All right. So my final question is, I didn't ask about your logo either. I forgot.
Oh.
My final question then is, would you do it all again?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. No question. Yeah, no, it's a great industry. I love all the different aspects of it. I love the people. I love the wine itself, but it's got to be more than just the wine. I love living in the Finger Lakes. So for me, it's been great.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you so much for your time, Shannon. Again, this is Shannon Brock of Silver Thread Vineyard in Lodi, New York, and I am Monica Wilkinson Kelly of the Edith B. Ford Library. Thank you for your time so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks.